Welcome back to the 40% Better podcast. As always, it's leadership, specifically in software teams. And Jill has graciously volunteered to give us some of her wisdom and experience today. Welcome to the show, Jill.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Great. So I have one question that's kind of the starting point that I ask everybody, which is, how did you get started in leadership? Like, were you leading soccer teams when you were 7, or was it something that, you kind of got pushed into later on, or like, what's the starting point? What's your origin story?
I mean, I guess a couple of things. I had my own business for a while, flipping real estate, and I had a couple of different teams or a couple of different employees, just like 3 or 4. But in software, really what it came down to is we were building some systems, and then it got to a point that like we needed a leader, and I was kind of like, well, I could be the leader or they could hire somebody else, and then I have to deal with their opinion. And so I kind of just said, I'll just do it because at least then then I get to drive the problems and drive the direction. And I didn't want to give that up. So I think it was a control thing more than anything, actually, at the end of the day.
It's okay to be in control and have self-awareness about that. I totally get it. Yeah. It's, I think that's a pretty common perspective, Yeah. When you started leading teams and leading specifically, the first one that you're doing, what were some of the influences that had you think about kind of how to approach it and how to have it work well?
Yeah, so I mean, when I had my first couple of teams of 5 or 7, like I didn't think about it. Like it was easy. I didn't have to work at it. It came very naturally. Like I was able to kind of get a lot of things done. My team was super motivated. We had a really good time. But then when I went from 7 to 40 overnight, and then 6 months late, and even then I was working a lot of hours, but I was still able to kind of do my thing in my style. And then really when I went from 40 to 250 after a merger, then I really had to be like, okay, I really need to figure out how to do this like a different way or, a better way. And that's really when I started really thinking about leadership as a skill.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I tend to think in terms of leadership as skills and systems. I'm very much a systems thinker. And although I will freely admit, when I started leading teams, I didn't think of it that way. I didn't realize I actually had a system I didn't realize I was building a system. And it wasn't until I like a decade in, and somebody actually started asking me about my system because of how my teams were performing, and I was like, I didn't know how to explain it. It was this interesting unconscious competency. So your first team, you said you guys were having a lot of fun and they were really motivated. What were you doing that helped them operate so well?
Yeah, so I mean, I think about that now because you try to like extract that into like a larger thing, and it becomes much harder, especially when you start to get remote teams and like global teams. It becomes a lot harder. But really, my second team, really, we were working for a small startup. There was 11 people in technology. There was four or five of us on the team. So the mission was really clear. The impact we were making was really clear. And then alignment across the team was really clear and easy because there's 4 of us and we're all in the same room. So
Yep.
I think those like are really big pieces of it is like, are you aligned with your teammates? Are you guys on the same page? Are you aligned to the mission of what you're doing? Do you feel purpose in that mission? And then, and then do you get along? can you have an argument and then walk away and have lunch together? Like that, I think that's a key piece if you're an engineer, because you're always wrong. And so you're never going to be right all the time. So you're going to get in a fight, and then eventually you're not going to be the one that's right. So you have to be in a place where you have a team that, you can have a hard argument with, and then no one walks away offended. That you walk away with like, okay, this person won, or the boss made a call and I don't think it's right, but I'll be right later, or whatever. And then you have to be able to go have lunch or a beer or whatever, and move past it, and then keep moving towards the mission. And I think in a small team, co-located, that's it's a magical place, but it's so much easier to create that. But as you get bigger and you have bigger teams and you have global teams, like you have to try to kind of create systems, like you said, or processes that create that level of trust, that create that level of understanding, that belief in ability to fail, and the ability to disagree, and the understanding of the mission, and all of those things have to be more deliberate.
Yeah, I like that. I'm a huge fan of trust, um, and and specifically being as proactive as possible about building trust. That
Mm-hmm.
seems like that's been a um, it's been a recurring theme that I've run into with teams that when I run into teams that don't perform well, lack of trust has been like kind of
It
this,
is.
like obvious billboard on the wall.
There's a
Um,
my biggest thing is failure. So I think that's my favorite thing about actually software engineering is like you cannot be a software engineer if you don't know how to fail. Like because it's never going to be right the first time. It's never going to actually work. I don't know anybody that writes their first line of code and it runs and works perfectly the first time
yeah,
they write the
right,
code.
right.
So failure is built in, but I think you have, as a leader, really have to do a good job of giving your team permission to fail and take risks. Because if you don't, then you're not going to move fast enough. You're not going to be competitive, and then people aren't secure to do like their absolute best work. So I always tell people, like, if you break production, you should feel bad, and then you should move on. And by the way, you're not a real developer unless you broke production at least one time. So, and I really do believe that, because otherwise you're not pushing the boundaries. You're not making things. You're not really being efficient and pushing to the highest level if you're not taking some level of risk. And you're not going to be successful, particularly in a startup or really competitive environment, if you're not pushing the limit. And so as a leader, I think our team needs to be like comfortable to take risks and know that we're gonna have their back if those risks don't pan out, as long as they're logical risks, obviously. So,
Right, right. Yeah,
yeah.
no, I think that's a huge part is the risk thing, right? Is the risk tolerance and the um the acceptance that, yeah, you're going to fail because
Yeah, you're gonna
that's
fail. You're gonna
yeah,
break production. Like you're
yeah,
you're not gonna get through a 25-year career and not have at least one or two instances where you're like,
yeah,
and you feel your stomach drop, and you know that what you did was not the thing you should have done. And so I think that that's really important for young engineers to hear. I think that safety is important. And then the processes that you build on top to kind of create that safety for your customers. I always think of this. I heard this talk at a tech talk once. It was a terrible tech talk to go to when you traveled, because it was about airplanes falling out of the sky.
oh no,
And I was thinking about it like the whole time I was flying home. But when I was there, it was like and he went through like 4 or 5 airplane crashes. And when they show them, there's 4 or 5 things that failed before the crash. And he compared that to like a production instances, like when you have production outages. Like it's
right, right,
never one person's fault. There's never like you should have a system in place where it's never one person's fault. And so even if you caused it or you feel like you caused it, there's generally like 4 or 5 pre-causes, that things that happened before that failed, before the ultimate, like,
Right,
this
right.
ultimately failed and completely crashed. And then they also talk about in that study, which was really interesting, of like the ability for those failures to be called out earlier reduces the number of crashes. So being people feeling comfortable to say, hey, like, this didn't really work out, or this isn't going to work out, or I see this problem. And that's part of that whole trust layer that we started to talk about earlier. It's like they have to be comfortable to fail, but then they also have to be able, like, to trust, like, when they're calling something out or when something's not right, that no one's going to shoot the messenger.
Yeah, yeah. Part of that
Yeah.
is failures. Kind of, it's a group effort. It's like,
That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
unfortunately, I mean,
exactly.
that's the sad truth, right? Is, you know, what did we as a group? How did and I mean, on the one hand, there's I think of this in two layers. One is, how am I with the team versus outward facing to the rest of the organization. One of my things is that um, if there's a problem and the team's getting criticized, I take the criticism. Like, I don't want them to get criticized by everybody else in the company. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to go and take the arrows and be like, it's my team, it's my responsibility. You know, like, you can criticize me, but leave them alone.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that helps. Like, we have internal conversations about, what the heck did we do wrong? Why did that
Yeah.
blow up? Um,
But yeah,
but
you can't. What I kind of have heard it as, and really resonates with me, is like, you can delegate responsibility, you can't delegate accountability, or maybe it's the reverse. I can't remember exactly, but basically, what is like, yes, like, it ultimately, individual A may be responsible for doing X, Y, and Z, but ultimately I'm accountable as the leader of the organization.
exactly,
So
yeah,
externally, I'm accountable. Internally, if it's your responsibility, then we're going to have a conversation. Because I do find that some leaders, what they do is they do a really good job of taking accountability, and then they don't push accountability down internally to their teams. And then
right,
their teammates are like, well, no one's getting held accountable. Like, that's frustrating, and that creates a lot of problems within the team. So it's really a balance of, like, outwardly being accountable to the organization, and then inwardly, making sure people know, hey, you're responsible for this, and if it's not going to happen the way that it needs to happen, then that's your responsibility, and we're going to have a conversation about that, and hold you accountable internally within the organization, because I think that creates trust across the different teams. Like, I know my ops team knows that if my devs do something that's, causing issues, like, they're going to be held accountable, and like vice versa. And that actually creates trust among the teams, that they know that they know they need to do their job, and they know that the other team's going to also do their job. And I think that's a core piece of really functioning well.
yeah, yeah. No, I like that. I like that. Yeah. Um, how do you, back to the systems thing, just because that's where my head goes, right?
Yeah.
um, what do you like? How do you, or do you have a system for training people up from individual contributor to team lead to director, or whatever you call the next layer?
Yeah, so I think it's different for everybody. Everybody's different. Um, everybody's ready at a different time, and everybody kind of needs different guidance. I really follow this idea of situational leadership. It's a methodology made in the '60s. I can't remember who made it, but it's basically for every single, it's not even at the personal level, it's at the task level. So for every single person that has a task on your team, like, there's 4 kind of levels that they can be at. They can be at, like, delegate. You could be able to delegate them that task, which means they're really good at the task. They know what they're doing. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do anything. And then there's, like, a mentorship task of where, they're doing the task, but you're kind of checking on them and making sure they're doing the task. And then there's the like showing them how to do the tasks. So maybe, and then the initial one of you doing the task and them watching. So there's, and you have to basically decide based on this person and the task, what leadership style do I need to use right now so that they can be most successful? And it may be different for a different task. Like you might have an engineer that's like super awesome at all this stuff, but you need him to go to some client meeting. So you may go with him to that client meeting. You may not delegate that client meeting. You may go with him and help. Or you may have you may have a manager that hasn't done XYZ before, so you need to help. You need to help them do that. Or you may have a manager that's super good with client meetings, and you're like, hey, go to that meeting, and I'll see you tomorrow. So I think you have to kind of understand, like, especially in your direct reporting structure, like, who are your people? What tasks can you delegate? What tasks do you need to stay close to? And then what tasks do you need to like teach? Where do you need to teach? And it's a really, if you get that right, it's beautiful, but I'm still get it wrong all the time. But you really do need to kind of like understand, like, is this something I could delegate? Or sometimes I'll delegate something and I'll be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have delegated this. Or sometimes I've got one individual that works for me that's worked for me for a long time, and he's like, Jill, just leave me alone right now. And it's like, I probably should be delegating at this point in time. So I think, you're always kind of you're modifying that behavior based on what's happening around you. But that's something I really try to kind of focus on. Is this something we should delegate? Is this something that, needs to be, handled? Trust but verify in certain cases.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that the situational thing. I always think about situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's good. I like the recognition that everybody's different, and there is no, like, humans are not widgets. And I can't just go to the store and buy another identical light bulb, as a human, right? Like, I can't just go get
Yeah.
another one that's the same. And so I think that's one of the
They're all different, but they're all the same. So I think it's about applying like the right piece in the right place, because that's the differentiation. Like if I'm promoting somebody to a team lead, some people might like automatically just be really good at delegating and handing out the work and breaking down, stories or whatever, and you don't have to teach them that.
Mhm.
Others, you have to kind of work on that. Other people might be really good at communication, and so you really have to kind of really understand, like, okay, I'm promoting this person to this new level. What are they gonna, where are they gonna do well and where are they gonna struggle? And like, where do I need to come alongside them and really kind of help them? And where do I need to let them build confidence because they have that skill and they're good at it and they can build confidence in their new leadership without me like hovering over the back of them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I always, what's the, what's that? There's a saying about artists, like, good artists create and great artists steal, or something like that. And
Okay.
I think that's how it goes. And I aspire to be a great artist, so I steal liberally. One of the things that I stole, one of my mentors years ago is in the military, and he ran military supply chains, and he always talked about how when he did promotions, he trained people first and then put them in the responsibility and, like, let them prove their competency before they got the new title, whatever it was. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've always tried to do that, because one of the things that I've run into every now and then, is that somebody says, "Oh, I want to blah blah whatever," right? And
Mm-hmm.
and then once they get into that place, all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, this is not what I expected."
Yeah.
And so, then.
Sometimes you don't have time sometimes you don't have time to do that, and then other times, like, we're getting into a culture, I think especially in the younger generations now, where They're like, I don't want to do that because I don't trust that it's going to, it's actually going to work out, because there's been too many people that have kind of taken advantage of that, and then then it doesn't come. So there's like a balance to that, but it was actually really good for me. Like one of my favorite bosses ever, when she took me from like 40 people to 250, and I'm like, hey, I want this title, I want this title essentially that goes with all of these people. And she was like, listen, I'm not sure you can do this job yet, and if I give you the title, I'll have to fire you. But if I don't give you the title and you try the job, then I don't have to fire you. So I would prefer, let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did, and it turned out okay. I did end up getting the title that I wanted, but there's also that side of it. Like, it's like sometimes you take your good person and you put them in a role, and then they're not successful, and then it's like, oh, now I don't want to demote them. So now what am I going to do? So there's this thing, and I think with her, what was so nice with her is she just was super honest about it. She's like, listen, like, we don't know how this is gonna go. So let's figure it out together. But and I think I've kind of tried to do that with I try to be just brutally honest with my team. Like, this is a situation that we have.
Yep.
It is what it is. And I find that people, like, more often than not, people respect that. They want to hear that. They want to understand where you're coming from. And when you do that, that conversation about not getting the title becomes a little bit easier. It's not like, oh no, we're not going to do it right now.
Right.
What?
Right.
It's like, hey, listen, like, I don't know if you're going to be any good. I might have to fire you. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe I want the title. Yeah. Like, let's try this out. So it's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the testing, right? You're like, we're testing to see how it's going to go. Mm-hmm. And I've certainly seen, over the years in my teams, people that the test turned out to be not successful.
Yeah.
And so, then it's okay, what do you do? And I guess, I think because I've always had the test first mentality, mm-hmm. I've never had to fire anyone. It's always been like, okay, experiment. Let's see, like, we're gonna try it and see what happens. And and usually it works out, and because we try to do it in a progressive fashion, where they've got where they can go, wait a minute, I need to bail on this because this is not what I thought I was getting into.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, like, if you have to let somebody go, I think the number one thing is that they should never be surprised, right? So that's my goal, is that, like, hey, I may have to let somebody go and they may not be performing, but there should be no surprise. And I think what happens sometimes is, like, and this happened to me once, actually. I let somebody go, and when I let him go, he was like, oh, what? And I reflected on that after the fact, and I was like, how did that happen? Because I thought I was being fairly clear throughout we had a performance improvement plan, like, we were meeting once a week. And my boss at the time, when I talked to him about it, he was a great guy. And he was like, Jill, there are some people in this world that when you say a bad thing and a good thing, they only hear the good thing. And so when you do these performance reviews and these kinds of plans, you really shouldn't say that much. Like, you can't do the, like, sandwich. Like, you have to tell them very clearly, like, this is not acceptable and this is why it's not acceptable, and then stop. Like, resist the urge to be like, and this was really good and this was really good, because they need to hear, like, what it is, to give them a chance to improve. Because what I feel really bad about in that interaction with that guy is he probably might have been able to improve, but he wasn't actually hearing me, throughout those, like, performance conversations. And so that was a huge lesson for me. And I still think about him sometimes, especially when I'm doing a performance improvement plan of, like, okay, like, we need to make sure that this person is actually hearing the real feedback, and it's not being kind of overshadowed by, I want to say something good too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Um, do you do I don't even know what it's called. I'm a huge fan of like in the moment coaching,
Mm-hmm.
rather than um, I think I've never been comfortable with quarterly or semi-annual or annual reviews because it feels like there's too much.
There's too much time in between
Yeah,
that
yeah,
happen, and then you feel like somebody's creating lists behind your back and all of all of this stuff. But
right.
I think I've had to learn to balance it because I think sometimes I go into coach too much in the moment, and then it's maybe in a public meeting, and that doesn't go very well, or it's overpowering. And I'm a pretty strong personality. You probably just tell by talking to me for an hour, and so I've really had to, for me, start to try to control my personality and like kind of hang back and then be observant and then have like
Mm,
be able to back channel the conversation. And I still sometimes get caught up in, I have my engineer hat on and not my manager hat, and then all of a sudden I said some idea wasn't good, and then then the CTO just said your idea is not good, and that's impactful actually. And I've had to learn over time like that you have to be really careful like of what hat you have on, who are you talking to, and how is the way that you're talking to them going to impact how they feel, how they actually feel and show up at the end of the day. And that circles like all the way back around to that like trust layer.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's one of those communication skill things that I think like the first team that I led, the one of the things that was really profound was the company founder, like 2 months in, like it was super early for me. Um, I was struggling with time management because I was trying to do as much coding as I had been before and do everything with the team and get like everything delegated and sprints working and all that junk, right? All at
Yeah.
the same time. And I wasn't sleeping enough. And I made some comment about it and in a meeting, and he said, "Oh, no, you have to realize in this job, I don't care if you never code again. Your job is to make everybody else really successful and really, really good at coding because no matter what you do, you can't code as much as that team can code, as an
Yeah.
individual, right?" And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. This is a whole different ball game." Like all these pieces started dropping into place in the back of my head. It was like
Mm-hmm.
Tetris all of a sudden just dropping. I was like, "Oh my God, okay, wait a minute. Now I can think very differently." And communication is such a piece of that. And I spent a lot of time working on my communication skills. I used to have horrible social anxiety,
Okay.
and that was a big unlock for me to figure out how to not have social anxiety anymore. Because in retrospect, it's like it's like you're talking about the failure of the airplane. There's like all these connecting pieces, right? In retrospect, I realized there's all these connecting pieces to social anxiety that that they're not obvious until way later, and you look back and you go, "Oh, this thing that I'm doing now that's super easy. Back then, I never considered doing it at all. Like it just seemed like an insurmountable thing." um, and I always think in tech, folks that we work with, oftentimes social anxiety is one of their challenges, and
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the level up is being able to systematically work through that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, from an engineering perspective, like one of the coolest things that we built like early on was the ability to like deploy. It was 10 or 15 years ago when this was new,
Hmm.
but the ability to deploy every single day, a couple times a day. And initially when we started to try to do that, it was like, God, I don't want to do this because it's so hard to deploy. You know, it's so hard to do it, so hard to deploy. And there was a young engineer that worked for me. He was maybe 1 or 2 year engineer, and he's like, "Well, Jill, if something's hard, you just do it more, and it gets easier." And I was like, "Yeah." And that's what we did. Like we started just deploying every day, and we started making it easier because you have to if you're going to do
Right,
it every
right,
day. And so I think there's some of that with like leadership skills too. It's like having a difficult conversation. Like I used to dread it, and I used to be like, oh, we have to have this difficult conversation with this person. But then, the more that you do it, like it gets easier, and you
right,
start to build tools and comfort in being able to handle, those situations. But if you just avoid doing it,
right.
then it's never going to get easier. And I think
Yeah,
that that's a choice that you have to decide. Like you have to make. You have to say like what is it that I want to spend time on and make easier, and what do I not care about.
right.
um One of those things is like that book 10,000 hours. Like if you spend 10,000 hours on anything, you'll be like a nine within the top 10% of people
Hmm.
doing that in the world. And so it's like where do you want to spend your time? Like what skill do you want to build? Like what do you want to be? And then it's just a matter of doing it, which is kind of empowering at some level, but
Right.
also like really really simple. And you're like, like some people will be like, oh, well, I'm not talented in this, or I'm not talented in this. And it's like, yeah, there's people with natural talent, but if you spend the time on it, you're still going to circumvent like the majority of individuals. And so, yeah, it's about where do you want to spend that time? And what do you want to do with it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I like that. I'm a huge fan of deliberate practice,
Yeah.
and the it's always what's the next level, you know. Um, incremental. I have to cough.
Oh, sure. Ooh.
My coffee is going down the wrong pipe, and
Oh no.
so anyway, yeah, it's the deliberate and incremental improvement in anything, and like that's how I got over my social anxiety. Was I built this and I didn't realize at the time um, kind of what I was doing, but I built this incremental system that was, a little piece, a little piece, a little piece, a little piece. Um, Later, have you read B.J. Fogg's book, Tiny Habits?
Yes. Or yes.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
there's tiny habits and atomic habits.
Hmm.
Both of and both of the authors, the two authors, are both profs at Stanford.
Okay.
um, and if they ever collaborate on a book, it'll be a bestseller, I'm sure. But the tiny habits one, he talks about habit stacking, and like that's how we learn math. Is
Hmm.
everybody's, no matter how far you go down the math road, everybody starts by counting single digits.
Yeah.
And we work our way up, and that's why if I say what's 7 times 3, you immediately in the back of your head are going 21, because we all have the exact same system. And I tend to look at everything that way, or like, how do I get there, right?
Yeah.
What's the systematic breakdown? Because for me, a lot of it is I want repeatable results as much as I can get them, and how do I teach other people to replicate and get the same kind of results? Like, I want my kids to be able to drive cars and not crash. And I know a bunch of things about how to drive cars and not crash. Incrementally, how do I build their skills up? You know,
Yeah.
and now that I, have a lot of experience driving, how do I do a better job at teaching them than my dad did teaching me?
Right.
Kind of a thing, right? um, and because now so I want everything to be transferable, because then they can apply it in their own context. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, math is very individualizable. I'm not sure if that's actually a word or not, but the way that I'm using math for geometry, for example, for doing a carpentry project, is very different from how my accountant does it for bookkeeping.
Right.
You know, and so I think about what are the skills to learn. What are all the fundamental baseline skills to learn that you can then go. It's like coding, right?
Yeah.
You learn how to code, and then it's the Python is Python is Python, but the thing that you're building could be radically different, or
Yep.
Java or whatever language you happen to be using. What language do you guys code in? I'm kind of randomly curious.
Well, we have a couple of different platforms. So we've got some .NET platforms. We've got some platforms in Python and Node. We've got some PHP platforms. So we kind
Oh
of have a
wow,
mix.
interesting.
Yeah, we have a mix of things going on for sure. But I think that's the coolest part about AI right now is that, I mean, to switch languages starts to become a lot easier. Like I can write something in Java and be like, hey, how do I do this how do I do this in Python? It helps a lot. And it's the same thing with the languages. Like once you kind of know one language, like you've now stacked that skill set, to a certain level. And like
Yeah,
building the next one on top of it becomes, so much easier. I wish that was true in like actual languages. I've like been trying to learn Spanish, and that is not. It's not as easy to switch from English to Spanish as it is to switch from Python to Java or or whatever.
right, right.
But with programming, it definitely like speaks to that like stacking, on the
Yeah,
math skills
yeah,
because it's about like systematically how do you think, and then and then you're layering syntax on top of that.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I just total random fun fact I just learned. Portuguese doesn't have the words for siblings that we have in English, and it's not even a like it's not a
Construct. Yeah.
construct. Yeah, and I'd never considered that as a possibility before. That something that to me seems so fundamental wouldn't be in somebody's language structure. It's like not having loops or something in programming. I'm like, what? Anyway, what? What kind of a
Yeah, it's
language?
interesting. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Total segue off of the whole leadership thing. When you want your folks to learn stuff about leadership, what books do you send them to, or courses, or blogs, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, there's like like I said, I go through that situational leadership book or program. Like that's a huge like that's when I start, that's where I
Hmm.
really start people. But then I mean I love different books about like, I'm kind of into basketball. I'll read a lot of books like about, basketball coaches or like football coaches or, and I think a lot of the biographies have like a really, they have really good kind of things you can pull from on certain people and how they did leadership and how they do this. What I try to do is like say like go find somebody that you admire or that is maybe kind of like you and go read their go read their
Right,
book
right,
and try to understand like what is their leadership style and what are they doing and what is what how does that like resonate with you. And then I think to me also leadership is really about like honestly a foundational journey with yourself. I think it's almost more therapy because really what you're doing when you're trying to lead people is you're controlling yourself. You have to control your personality, you have to try to control your reactions, you have to like look, like figure out what that other person needs. And so for me, the leadership journey has been an actual very personal like transformative like inner journey. And so I've read books like The Mountain Is You, which talks about, you know, how do you overcome like your status quo in your life. You know, The Untethered Soul is another great book about controlling like your inner thoughts and how you think about things. And so I think the more you learn about yourself and the more you like learn how to control your personality, the better leader that you are. So it's not even about how you deal with other people. It really starts like with yourself. Huge fan of the Enneagram, like to understand your personality, like and the things that trigger you and the things that you're good at, and then try to like if you know more about yourself, like then you can apply like certain levels of control at different times. And the more I'm in leadership, the more I find that it's more about self-control than about anything else.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, definitely. There's a self-awareness. You know, that's what you're talking about. It's all self-awareness in there. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be because yeah, or at least I have to be because I can be very, you know, I can be very focused on a problem, very demanding, very, you know, and all of those things are positives. And then in some situations, they're not, they're not positive or
Right.
helpful. And so it's like, when do you apply those things and that you're good at? And when do you say, like, this is probably not the situation to, you know, to push or
Yeah.
to do X, Y, or Z? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I think. Yeah. The one of the really early influences that I had was I worked in a high end restaurant in college, and
Uh-huh.
the one of the things about that restaurant that was really interesting was they had an internal coaching culture, and they didn't care where the coaching came from. And the guy that was the GM was very clear that ideas come from everywhere, and oftentimes it was new employees that would come in, and you know they'd been there for a month and a half, and they'd be like, "Why do we do this thing like this? It's not super like if we did this like this tweak, it would be way more efficient, right?" Versus the guys that had been there 3 years were so used to it, they couldn't see
Yeah,
it.
we just do it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
and
we do it because we do it.
yeah, yeah, it's like that's what we've always done it, kind of a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and I remember he was always so happy when somebody like even if it didn't work out, like we
Mm-hmm.
experimented all the time with stuff. They didn't all pan out, but
Yeah.
but he was really happy that people would be like because we had like meetings before the restaurant opened every night, kind of like a stand up, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, some you know people would be like, hey, you know, blah blah blah, whatever idea, right? I think we did that on Wednesdays or something like that, and because there's one day of the week that was like,
Yeah.
if you got ideas, right? He was always so happy that like the people at the low end of the totem pole would speak up and and you know it was like everybody was it was just so cool that we did that. I really liked his self-awareness about that he wasn't going to see the great ideas all the time, you
Yeah.
know, and that really his job was to give us the space to go, oh wait a minute, you know, can we tweak this? Um, and then another guy that I worked for years later was one of the technology companies. He was very focused on um, not being the smartest guy in the room. Like he coached me a little bit, and one of his comments one time was, you know, you've got this team of really really bright people. Like let them run. Like don't try to be this. Like your job as the team as the lead is not to be the smartest guy in the room anymore. It's to really get everybody else's ideas out because sooner or later they're going to have ideas you didn't think of. They're going to be better than yours,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And if you're the last one to talk, maybe you're going to realize your idea is not as good as theirs are, and then you're just don't say anything, you know. and and I really like that, you know.
I think
Yeah.
for me, like the biggest thing for me when I got to be a bigger team, and especially because I was I was still managing the platform that I had essentially built. So I knew everything about that platform.
Right.
I was like the premier expert on the platform. But what I learned was um, people would stop thinking when I came around. So there would be a production issue, and then I would walk in the room, and everybody would stop thinking because they're like, Jill has the answer. And and that's not scalable. Like you can't scale that way. And so what I had to really teach myself in during that time to say, even though I know the answer, and even though I'm watching them kind of struggle through this production problem, like you need to shut up and like let them A, think, B, build the confidence in themselves that they can do it, that they don't need me there, and then C, obviously like you can step in when, the last minute if you don't have time on like some funding thing or something, but really giving them the space and the time to do their own thinking, because otherwise what happens, and this did happen to me for a while and I had to correct it, is that people just they don't think when you're in the room, because they're just
Right.
like, you know what, she's smart and she has the answer and I don't have to think. And it's like the dolphins that, like, when you feed them they stop hunting. It's the same kind of concept. And so really, like, even if you have the answer, even if you know it, I think it's really important to let other people fish. And that was a big lesson when I went from 40 people to like 200 people. It's like, because you can't be in all the room all the time, so they need to know how to do it, and you can kind of get away with it with 30 or 40 people. You can be around enough, but
Right.
once you start to scale like 100, 200 people across like 6 countries, you're like, no, like, everybody does need to like start to really be able to think through, these difficult problems themselves, even if it takes longer. And even if we may have a longer outage, and even if maybe it impacts the customer, because longer term, it's better for the team, it's better for the business as a whole.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a smart investment perspective to
Yeah.
have that long view. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
It's hard to do. It's hard to do in the moment when,
Yeah.
customers
Yeah.
are upset, people are screaming, this is wrong or that's wrong, and you know the answer. Like, there was some nights I was watching on Slack, like, for 2 hours, and I'm like, oh, they almost have it, it's almost have it, and then, but you do that once or twice, and you don't have to do it again, because
Right.
people are smart, they'll figure it out, but if they don't have to,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They rely on you. You become the crutch.
yeah, you
Yeah.
become, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
So
what you're talking about is them growing their own skill set and trusting themselves, you know?
exactly, it's a
Yeah.
confidence builder. Like, I can do it. I don't need to call so and so. I don't need to check. I'm because they say like confidence is contagious, right? Like, the second, like, the
Hmm.
the best thing you can do is like try something and be successful at one thing, because as soon as you're success, like, it's a loop. And
Right.
so you have to kind of help them get into that loop, and then it builds on itself really quickly.
I like that idea that confidence is contagious. That's
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
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 Like, yeah, once you have a win, then you get another win, another win, another win. Um, but yeah, you have to get that first couple of wins. And that's what they talk about in Atomic Habits too. It's like you start, you have to set yourself up to win, and then once you start to
Yeah.
win, like, that all builds momentum, and it's a lot of it's a momentum game.
Right.
Although I still haven't figured it out. Like, I read Atomic Habits, I don't know, 2 years ago, and I put my shoes next to my bed so I'll walk in the morning, and I do that maybe 25% of the time. So I don't know.
um, the next book you need to read is Extreme Ownership. Jocko Willink's book, Discipline Equals Freedom. You
Okay.
just you just have to have the discipline, or
Yeah.
so I figure out how to make things. Like, I'm a huge fan of converting uh, chores to play. and so um I I bicycle a lot, and I part of the reason that part of the way that I did that was I bought a bicycle that I really like riding. And so for me it's like I've got this kid, I've got a toy, right? And I get to go play with it, and it sits right by the front door, so that I always see the toy there, and I'm always like, "Oh my god, I so want to go for," like right now I'm seeing it and I'm like, "Oh my god, I so want to go for a ride right now." Um because the toy's fun to play with, right? Like the I've got this carrot sitting over there
Yeah.
that's in a good direction, um that's enticing me, like, hey, you should go for a bike ride today,
Yeah.
and that's one of my hacks, is to always is to have those toy things. um you mentioned having people on multiple continents. How do you, like, what are the things that you do to help them feel trusting?
Them feel what?
Have them feel trust. Like, obviously they're not in the same office with you, right? They're
Yeah.
thousands of miles away. So, how do you help them feel better?
Yeah, I mean, so when I took on the bigger leadership role from like 40 people to 200, it was actually in the middle of COVID, and I took people on multiple continents. So I wasn't able to even travel or meet them in person at all. So that was like really, really difficult. And so I think a little bit is just like you have to always have your camera on. Like join the meetings, have your camera on, attend meetings. I try to have office hours with my people that are not on the same continent. So, you can join a meeting with me like once a month, and I'm just there. You can come in, talk to me just like you would if I had an office in there. And so I have open office hours with each region at a certain time every month. So people can just join and we can have a conversation, whether it's about work or fun or whatever. The other thing that I do is like I try to not ask them to do things that I wouldn't do. So if we have
Mm,
to have late night meetings, like I'll be on at midnight, and then sometimes they have to be on, late. And so we try to rotate that around, and it's not always one region that's like always the one that's up late or up early or, whatever. And so I think being kind of in the trenches in that way, like showing up. I'm a really big fan of going to everybody's demos. No matter how many teams I
mm,
have, sometimes every other week, I at my other job, I used to spend every other Thursday all day from like 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. in demos. Because I think, people want to know that their work matters and
right.
that you actually care about what they're doing, and that what they're doing is moving the needle. And I really try hard in those demos to be present, not be multitasking, like actually watch the demo, and then really contribute at the end of every demo to talk to them about what was good, what was bad, how this contributes to like our overall goal, and ask good questions so people know like, hey, my leadership cares about what I'm doing. They're paying attention. And regardless of whether I'm in Chicago or in Vienna, like that really, I think that's the biggest thing is like, are you engaged with your team? And are you available to your team? And then are you contributing in the same way they're contributing? Like, are you asking them always to be the ones that wake up in the middle of the night, or not?
Right.
So those are some like core pieces. And then I have a really core tenet of we have to have fun. Like we're in a serious business, we do serious things, but like you spend a lot of time at work, so like have fun. Like don't take yourself too seriously. And so I really do try to inject like fun into, different levels of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Whether that's like sharing good news at the beginning of a meeting, or doing a dad jokes during like the demos, like, you got a dad, anybody have a dad joke? Or, you know, um this one I like to do is like, have special guests join certain like all hands meetings. Make sure you're calling people out for their work. And so um we'll do a meet and mingle. Like we try really be intentional about like weaving in some fun. Because if you forget to have fun, it just becomes such a grind, and
Right.
people you lose people, especially remote culture. Like you have to be intentional because you don't get those like water breaks of like, so you have to like kind of take them like, okay,
Right.
5 minutes beginning of the meeting, let's talk about something that's not work, because you have to be intentional about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. As you're talking, I realize, huh? I, I've always known, and like everybody on my team has always talked about, and I can't remember when I started doing this, but I always ask about, like, I always want to know what's going on personally with them. Vacation, kids, travel,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, new hobby. Um, and I even, like, I've never actually inherited a team and then ask what their past was like. Like, I just automatically did it because I thought that was the way things are supposed to go. I never really thought about what the last person do and what's the delta, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and it just, like I would just jump in and like, okay, here's, this is how I operate, and they all liked
Yeah, I
it.
always
So,
try to like have one-on-ones with everybody, every new team
oh yeah,
member,
yeah,
and all the way down the stack, just so I kind of get a perspective of, who
yeah,
people are, what, what do they do, and then a lot of those guys, like we talked earlier, have the best insight because, they're
right,
in the day-to-day grind.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They're in the day to day, and they've got the
Yeah.
closest visibility. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
on the sales side, the front end SDRs, they're hearing things from prospects that the CRO hasn't heard yet.
Yep.
And you're like, oh
100%.
yeah, wait a minute, hang on. The market's changing. We got to pay attention to that. So I'm just looking at the time and going, oh, I need to stop asking you questions. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the insights. Yeah, this is very cool.
No, I had a great
Yeah,
time. It was really fun to talk to you. So thanks for having me on. I really
I
appreciate it.
appreciate it. Yeah.